Russia has officially entered a state of red alert. Vladimir Putin, its increasingly cornered leader, is running out of moves. Panic has spread across the nation as explosions and fires tear through its cities and key industrial zones. The economy is collapsing under pressure, and the cause of this chaos is Ukraine relentlessly targeting Russian infrastructure with precise and devastating strikes. With few options left, Putin has made one of his boldest wartime decisions, a move that will shape the conflict's next chapter and expose how desperate the Kremlin's position has truly become. On October 22, the Russian military announced a nationwide call-up of army reservists to defend critical infrastructure on Russian soil. The declaration came directly from Vice Admiral Vladimir Tsimliansky, deputy chief of the main organizational and mobilization directorate of the Russian General Staff, essentially the country's top conscription official. In a televised statement, he revealed that the government had decided to engage the most prepared and patriotic citizens to protect vital facilities deep within Russia. His words exposed far more than the Kremlin likely intended. This announcement signals that Russia is now in a state of growing desperation. For nearly 2 years, Putin and his regime have maintained a facade of confidence, insisting that everything was under control, that Russia's economy was holding strong, that sanctions were meaningless, and that its troops were advancing steadily through Ukraine. Inside Russia, these claims have been reinforced through state-controlled television and media propaganda, giving the illusion of progress and stability, but the truth, long hidden behind layers of lies, is now forcing its way into public view. By calling up reservists for domestic defense, Moscow is admitting that its infrastructure is under severe and sustained attack. Ukrainian drone and missile strikes have become too frequent and effective to ignore, and Russia's existing air defense systems are failing to stop them. With most of the army tied up along the Ukrainian front lines, Putin's government has turned to its reservists, ordinary citizens with past military service, to protect the homeland from further devastation. This decision also proves that Ukraine's strategy is working. Over recent months, Kyiv has executed a calculated campaign against high-value targets inside Russia: oil depots, refineries, fuel storage sites, and pipelines. These strikes have caused massive explosions, days-long fires, and significant damage to Russia's energy network. Individually, each strike may seem limited, but together they have dealt a serious blow to Russia's war machine. The destruction has sparked a nationwide fuel shortage, forcing citizens to queue for hours and pay outrageous prices for gasoline. Many gas stations have shut down or imposed strict limits, and the crisis is spreading from region to region. Vice Admiral Tsimliansky emphasized that reservists would first receive specialized training before being deployed to guard essential infrastructure such as refineries and transportation hubs. He explained that the new draft law being introduced by the Defense Ministry allows reservists to serve only within their home regions, not abroad or near front-line combat zones. The Kremlin was quick to stress that this should not be mistaken for a full mobilization. According to officials, reservists are civilians who maintain their regular jobs and family lives while contributing to defense efforts on a part-time basis. However, anyone familiar with the Kremlin's history of deception knows that official statements cannot be taken at face value. Russian authorities are notorious for announcing one thing and quietly doing the opposite. Even before the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Putin's representatives repeatedly denied any plans for war, calling Western warnings hysteria, yet just weeks later Russian tanks rolled across the border. The same tactic could easily be playing out again today. They call it a voluntary defense measure. Tomorrow, it could evolve into a full-scale mobilization of Russia's estimated 2 million reservists. There are reasons to believe this scenario is not far-fetched. First, the Kremlin has a long track record of manipulating language to disguise its true intentions, even calling the war a special military operation to downplay its brutality. Second, Tsimliansky's repeated insistence that this was not mobilization seemed almost too forceful, as though he was trying to preempt public suspicion. When a government keeps emphasizing the same point, it usually means there is something it does not want people to question. Furthermore, Putin's past comments provide another clue. He has repeatedly stated that he views Ukraine and Russia as one people, even declaring that all of Ukraine is ours. That belief, combined with the new draft law allowing reservists to defend Russian territory, could easily be twisted to justify sending them into Ukraine under the claim that they are still operating within Russian land. In essence, this could be a backdoor strategy to deploy reserve forces to the front without formally declaring another mobilization. Another major factor driving this policy shift is money. Russia's economy is deteriorating fast. The country initially managed to absorb the shock of Western sanctions through careful preparation, energy exports, and trade with nations like China and India, but nearly 4 years into the war, those buffers have worn thin. Inflation is soaring, the ruble is unstable, and the costs of maintaining the war have become unbearable. A recent report revealed that Moscow spent more than 2 trillion rubles, around $25 billion on manpower alone during the first half of 2025. This includes massive signing bonuses for new recruits, monthly pay for soldiers, and compensation for casualties. If spending continues at this rate, Russia will have burned through roughly 4 trillion rubles, nearly $50 billion by year's end, about 10% of its total federal budget. It is a staggering amount that the Kremlin simply cannot sustain, so instead of continuously offering expensive incentives to new recruits, Putin's government may turn to reservists as a cheaper, more efficient alternative. They are already trained, already on file, and far less expensive to mobilize. Analysts from the US-based Institute for the Study of War recently issued a report warning that the Kremlin may indeed be preparing to mobilize reservists on a rolling basis. The study explains that Russia's current recruitment system, which relies heavily on financial incentives, is losing momentum and proving too costly. According to the ISW, a new legal amendment passed on October 13 could allow Moscow to deploy reservists more easily without having to issue a formal declaration of war or mobilization. This would let Putin quietly expand his army while avoiding public backlash. But such a move carries enormous risk. The Russian people are growing tired of this endless war, and public anger could erupt if families realize their loved ones are being sent to Ukraine under false pretenses. The Kremlin will likely spend enormous resources trying to convince citizens that any reservists deployed to the front volunteered willingly. If that narrative collapses, Putin could face one of his greatest domestic crises yet. In short, Russia is walking a perilous line. Calling up reservists to defend the homeland might sound defensive and limited, but it exposes the Kremlin's growing weakness. Ukraine has demonstrated it can strike anywhere, anytime, leaving Russia scrambling to protect what remains of its infrastructure. If the reservists stay within Russia, they will likely fail to stop Ukraine's momentum. If they are secretly deployed to the front lines, Putin risks inflaming public outrage and potentially sparking unrest across the nation. Either way, this decision reveals how far things have fallen for Moscow. The war that Putin once promised would be swift and victorious has now turned into a grinding, costly, and humiliating disaster, one that threatens not just his legacy but the very stability of his regime. What was once projected as a confident show of strength has now become a slow collapse under the weight of its own lies. The Russian leadership that once boasted about military superiority and unity now faces confusion, fatigue, and growing anger from within. Ordinary citizens are paying the price through inflation, shortages, and fear as their sons and husbands are sent to fight in a war that has no end in sight. The grand vision of reclaiming lost glory has dissolved into chaos and desperation. The Russian economy continues to shrink as sanctions tighten and foreign investors flee, while military losses mount with reports of destroyed convoys, depleted ammunition, and exhausted troops stretched to their limits. Morale among soldiers is dangerously low, and even loyal supporters are beginning to question whether this war was ever worth the cost. Inside the Kremlin, panic and paranoia have begun to take hold as Putin's inner circle, filled with distrust and fear, starts to crumble under pressure. Officials who once praised his every move are now quietly seeking ways to protect themselves from the inevitable fallout. Each battlefield defeat weakens his image of control, and every Ukrainian strike inside Russian territory exposes the crumbling illusion of safety. The propaganda that once kept the population calm is losing its grip as people begin to see the truth with their own eyes. The promise of victory has turned into the grim reality of survival, and Moscow is struggling to maintain order amid growing domestic unrest and international isolation. For Putin, this war is no longer about Ukraine. It has become a desperate battle to cling to power and protect the illusion of strength that once defined his rule. Every failed offensive and every new sanction chips away at his control, revealing a leader trapped by his own ambitions and a regime collapsing under the weight of its own deceit.